welcome my listeners back to the Green Light to Be Great podcast. On this show, we talk about what it takes for adults to build emotionally supportive environments where young people thrive. And that works. It starts with adults who can name what they actually do and why. My guest today is a trauma-informed educator, writer, and founder with over a decade across traditional and charter school systems. She holds advanced degrees in educational equity and educational leadership. She's trained in restorative processes and cognitive coaching. And she's the founder of Hands of Nine, a space that she's called is built for cycle breakers. But before we talk any more about your resume, I want you to introduce yourself in your own unique way.
Okay. Well, hey, listeners, it's nice to meet you all. My name is Rebecca Newby, and as already stated, I'm an educator, and I'm also an entrepreneur, very new entrepreneur. Recently just stepped beyond buildings is the way that I put it. And I'm expanding in order to be able to reach all generations and all people, because I believe that we're all a part of a much larger system. Systems don't save people. People save and serve people. And so my goal is to actually reach people exactly where they are. I use my blog, which I write weekly, and I'm also going to expand into doing much more as time goes on, but taking things one day at a time as God truly guides every single step that I take. I'm really rooted in my faith. Hands of Nine, I use the Roman numerals I and X to symbolize the 9, and that stands for identity over outcomes. And so it's all about knowing who you are and the work that you do that comes afterwards. That doesn't define you. It starts with, like you said, that self-awareness. And so I'm really big on being a guide to all people. I even read my blog with my 10-year-old and my 96-year-old great-grandmother. And so just truly being able to reach people from every generation and pour into them, because I believe that your words have the power to heal your pain. And so we have to know how to use our words and to be able to articulate ourselves in a certain way. And I'm able to do that using the platform that I have now.
Absolutely. Well, listen, I love that. I'm already loving some of the things that you've said. I loved when you said, people don't save, systems don't save people, people save people. But me being a system-minded person, I would add to your quote and say, yes, you're right. People don't save systems, right? People save people, but then I also think that people can save systems.
So I actually caught myself when I said that, because the word that I've had to like honestly take off the weight of feeling like it's your responsibility to save anybody, period. I'm here to serve. I'm here to help. I'm not here to save. I believe there's only one true risen Savior, and that's Jesus Christ. I believe we as humans, God gives us the power and the authority to do certain things. But unless we understand who He has called us to be, we'll never be able to do all He has called us to do.
Yeah.
We'll get caught up in the rat race, the crabs in a barrel mentality, comparison, and we'll never truly accomplish our personal purpose because we're so caught up in thinking and feeling that it is our job to save anybody. That's not our job. We're called to serve. We're called to help. And as you can see, that's still something that I am actively applying to my thinking. And that's how I'm able to catch myself when I say it and say, systems, they're needed. We need systems of support, but systems are built with people that have to do the work. And unless we as people can start seeing the people that are right there with us serving, even if they're struggling, they're still there with you in that system. But the system, oftentimes, if we're not aware of it, and I'll talk about the different types of systems as we go forward, but systems, if we're not aware, it will have you turning on others and yourself, and you won't even realize that you're not serving anymore. You're You're either a part of the problem or you're part of the solution.
Yeah.
You're either here to help or you're hurting. There's no such thing as neutral.
That's a phenomenal reframe. And I think what you're saying right now about realizing that you're in a position where you're not even serving anymore. That's going to really tie into our conversation later when we kind of talk about teacher burnout. But then overall, you're a reframe of like not putting yourself in a position where you're responsible for saving people or you're taking on that burden. That's a really, really good reminder for myself and even for people who listen to this podcast. You just want to serve to impact the system because some things are out of our control. Some things are not up to us. And so I think we have to, as we kind of fight this fight of helping young people, right, the way we want to, we just have to remember that like we're here to make an impact in places that we're fortunate to end up. That's so good. So I'm gonna ask you this question. So how do you explain what you do? This podcast is for educators, it's for teachers, it's for seasoned teachers, new building leaders, seasoned building leaders. So how do you explain what you bring to the educational ecosystem through your work in a way that all of those different levels can understand it?
Simply put, I believe my purpose is to help people transform their pain into peace. When we talk about systems, educators, we have to understand that our students come to us and we don't choose our students, just like we don't get to choose our children or our family that we're born into.
Yeah.
All of these systems that we're a part of.
Right.
You don't choose those things. You only have the power to choose how you are going to respond to what you see and what you feel and what you're going to do. And so I'm so grateful that God has given me the words to be able to simplify the work that I do because I've saw it show up in every position I've served in. Without understanding the fullness of what he was giving birth to, which is hands of nine. It has truly been a process of surrenderance and a journey, very personal journey where I'm able to focus on what I can control and do what God has called me to do because I know who I am in him.
Yeah, that's good. Would you say your career, the gift that you've been given as an educator, would you say that's a calling? Would you say that's something from God? Is this kind of what you were destined to do? What's your take on that?
I definitely believe there's a saying that says, many are called, but few are chosen. I believe that the calling to education for me was definitely natural. I come from a family of educators, but I always thought to myself, I'm going to do something different. But whenever it's placed on your heart and it just kind of keeps coming back and coming back and coming back, and even when you're like, well, I'm going to try this, and then opportunity comes and God is like, no, you're actually going to do this because this is what's best for you, and you don't know the plans that I have for you. But go ahead and take it, smile, and serve because that's what I called you to do. I was able to experience so much in my time in education in Pine Bluff, from serving inside the school building as an educator, leaving the traditional school system, saying I'm going to be a community organizer and help advocate and get parents together, and then by October of that same year being back in a school building serving as an assistant principal. By that point, went on to be an assistant principal there for another year before we were absorbed, that was the word that was used, into another charter network. Yeah. Served as an assistant principal and then promoted to principal of the highest performing charter school in the state of Arkansas at that time. And ending that school year telling God what I was going to do in 3 to 5 years, and he made it happen in 3 to 5 months. And I'm like, wow. So truly, when you tell God your plans, like, he will continue to guide you along that path as long as you are committed to him. He knows your heart. He knows his plans. And we are just merely vessels doing what we're called to do. And so I definitely describe it as a calling.
For sure.
And I definitely see myself as chosen by God to do what I've done. And I have no idea of all the things that I'm going to do, because his word says it'll be more than you can ask, think, or imagine. And so I'm like, whoa, you blow my mind.
Yeah, that's the scary piece of it.
Yes.
Right? When
The unknown.
And when you have vision, you're a visionary, and you think what you're thinking is big, but you're like, oh, what God is planning is even bigger. So like
Always.
So it's just amazing how you get on the journey and just buy into seeing how God would use you. So the green light should be great. I want to just explain that for maybe new listeners, especially within this angle of the conversation we're having today. Coming out of high school, I was an underperformer. Academically, I was very much a late bloomer, and I spent about a decade working hard, trying to prove to the world that I wasn't what my high school GPA said I was, that I wasn't what my ACT score said I was, that I wasn't like the person that had to take remedial courses before I could start taking college courses, even at a community college. And so you look up 10 years later and got a bachelor's degree in business, went on to get an MBA in business, started teaching business courses back at the community college that I got my start at, pursuing a degree in mental health therapy. But what I realized before really shifting from kind of like business and nonprofit management to mental health and to kind of like social impact work through my firm Long Impact Group, what I realized that I always thought the green light should be great was education. I always thought it was the degrees for me. I always thought it was give me the opportunity to work jobs, to work the big jobs. Then I looked up and I was the CEO of Big Brothers Big Sisters for 3 years. I looked up and I had governor appointments to college boards. I looked up and I had almost every accolade someone could want, but during my quiet time, I felt empty. And so one day I looked over my resume at all the different things that I had done, and what I really realized was that I was actually operating broken. And so then I went back to really assess my childhood, and then I realized actually what I needed to be great was a different level of social emotional support than every school I attended offered.
Yeah.
And it's truly, the green light should be great. It's an ecosystem because it's filling in the gap with how adult educators are trained to think about social emotional support, and it's helping build relationships and know more about their students. So, because in my childhood, it's over, as far as I can remember, it was just chronic trauma, right? Just chronic, I couldn't escape. And so, Dad got arrested. Dad was in a serious fight with family.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dad gets addicted to crack cocaine.
Yeah.
Right? Mom's dealing with a disability all the time.
Yeah.
DHS steps in and starts to interview us because they're thinking about taking us away from our home. Dad gets beat up. Right. Mom faces discrimination as someone who had a rehabilitation counseling degree, but never got the opportunity to work in the field. Mom never got mental health support for dealing with her being disabled. Father never got mental health support. I had undiagnosed ADHD. And so it's all these different things that in our ecosystem we call yellow and red lights stunted my progress. And so I came into adulthood not only behind academically, but I was behind emotionally. Yeah. And being behind emotionally has impacted me the most. And so my heart for this work is, if we start with the core of a person, with belonging and connection of a young person, then everything else can fall in line. All of the academic outcomes that we want will be there. All of the pursuing of careers, it'll be there. But you got to stop sending young people into adulthood at an emotional deficit, because what people don't understand is sometimes these things seem little or not having an impact, but neglect, social emotional neglect over time creates mental health disorders. You don't inherit ADHD, right? It happens because your childhood development is interrupted. You don't inherit. These are my diagnoses. You don't inherit PTSD, right? It's over time. You go through so much, don't have the space to process it, that now your worldview and your nervous system is just, it's changed, right? So then you have to do that work, spend thousands of dollars, right, to understand yourself. And I know how much of a privilege it is that I've been afforded the opportunity, the grace, the mercy to be able to go to therapy, right?
Yeah.
To be able to have my own mental health team to help me really unpack my childhood, right? So I could become a different person. But I like the word of when I was researching you, I saw online the word, this is where this is tying in, cycle breaker, right? And so talk more about your approach to supporting teachers, promoting trauma-informed teachers, and empowering those teachers to become cycle breakers. Elaborate that.
Yeah. I first want to say I love how you're able to articulate the things that you experience. And you're also able to connect those things to who you are now. And I heard you, able to articulate just your privilege in and of itself from being able. I always say just to be able is a blessing. Right. Being a cycle breaker as an educator, it starts with us being able to be honest with ourselves.
That's so good.
That's the work. The work is not the students before you. The work is not your administrator coming down the hallway and that feeling you get in your body, whether you like them or you dislike them. The work is not anything that you can see. The work is internal. And we as cycle breakers have to understand that since we are doing work, I always say we're in the business of people, no matter if you're working at a cash register or if you're working in a school system or if you are working for the president of the United States. Yeah. If you're a person, you're in the business of people. And we have to learn that the work, no matter what our title is, starts with ourselves. And so being able to ask ourselves those hard questions about, well, how does that make me feel? And why do I think that's normal? And what did that do for me when that happened? Oftentimes, we are not even, you don't know what you don't know. And so you come into the field and you think this is what it's going to be like. And then you are met with the reality of, whoa, this is overstimulating and I'm not prepared for all of these expectations, all of the needs that are unmet right before me. And there's no one here to even help me take care of me. And if you do have somebody, it's one or two and they're few in number. And so in order to be a cycle breaker, we have to identify as a cycle breaker, identify as a change agent, identify as a trailblazer, accept that you may feel alone at times or like an outsider if you're choosing to do things different, if you're choosing to be better than you were before, or to say, instead of being like my teacher that said, well, if you didn't turn it in, you get a 0. And the system is not gonna, that's the easiest route at this point. It's the path of least resistance. You know exactly which students you'll have to deal with their parents and which students you don't have to. So even as adults, we're trying to see what we can get away with. Instead of operating with that mindset of focusing on them, like I said, everything that you see, you have to learn how to focus on him and understand that Jesus is the only standard that we hold ourselves to. And like, what was the work that he came to do? And what is the work that he trusted us with whenever he departed from this earth? And who did he leave us with to help? According to the word, the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
And the Holy Spirit gives us the power to witness.
Yeah.
And so when people see you, what do they see? How do they feel? What do your students feel? And it's not easy. It's not easy. I'm grateful that I was able to practice the fruits of the Spirit as a parent before I became an educator, because that kind of started the work for me. But my daughter was 2 when I started teaching. So now when people see her and she's taller than me, they're like, who's this kid? And I'm like, that's Jada.
Yeah. Wow.
So it starts with your identity, identifying as a cycle breaker, and then accepting what comes with that. It's not going to be easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. That's why I like the work that we're doing. I like the way you're attempting to show up for teachers who really want to lean into trauma-informed teaching. Because leaning into trauma-informed teaching is I think that's like the manifestation of what you're saying, is like accept everything that comes with it. So you...
Can I say this?
No, absolutely. Go ahead.
Schools, and my sister, she's in the healthcare system, right? My mom's in the healthcare system. They are taught what's called bedside manner in the healthcare system.
Yeah.
And even if your patient is rude, upset, hostile, you may have to remove certain family members from that room, but you still have to deal with that patient in a way where you understand that your job is on the line. Oftentimes, the difference in the education system is Tupac's definition of thug life is the hate you give little infants. F's everybody. We're dealing with big grown adults like me and you right here that haven't done the work, or are just getting started in the work, or don't even realize the work that they signed up for, because they're like, wait, this was not in the contract. Where did this come from? And yet we trust these adults to care for these kids, but like you said, the system itself is not set up to care for the people. The system is set up to make sure that if, unfortunately, Mr. Long passes away today, we got to have somebody that we can get back in that classroom, because the job has to be done. The show must go on. And over time, the education system has even began lowering the bar completely. And now we're dealing with kids with needs that are higher than we've ever experienced in this social media decade, and the trauma that we're experiencing, and what is it doing to our nervous system for real. And then you have adults, and this is not me saying this is research. A dysregulated adult cannot regulate dysregulated children. It turns into a lot of power struggles, a lot of power tripping, and a lot of things happen in schools that we know could never happen at a hospital. And even at a gas station or in customer service, like, they teach them to say, well, the customer is always right. The customer may not be right, but you can't put your job at risk by acting like you're not getting paid and that you're not representing something bigger than you. Depending on where you're at, and oftentimes the system has us blind because we look like sometimes the kids that we're serving, and we're doing what we had done to us and what our parents did to us. And so we think that it's normal. Sure. And that's what leads to some of the things that we see happening in classrooms that blow up on social media. And I argue, as professionals, like, especially professionals in education dealing with children, we still have a job to do. No matter how hard that job is, we still have a job to do. I would hate to go to a hospital that, instead of them training their professionals to deal with bullet wounds and trauma from the community, they say, well, I don't know why all these people keep getting shot. I don't know why they keep sending them here, even though I don't know. That they just need to, we're able to deflect and kind of put it off on the parents or the students or the system, and we don't focus on ourselves. Like I said, it starts with the self-awareness.
No, that's so good. And this is the conversation that I've had with hundreds of educators, building this framework, then also in my nonprofit space, it was all youth development work. And so I partnered with educators, with schools, with after school programs. And I heard principals and teachers alike say what you're saying, that the job is difficult, that they didn't know how to reach the teachers, how to get them to own that piece of it, right? And the analogy that you've provided, I think, is something phenomenal that I think every school building leader and the teachers within them need to hear. Like in customer service, there's a standard you have to stick to. Bedside manner, that's your standard, right? You have to stick to.
I believe every school should be like Chick-fil-A.
Yeah. But I feel Chick-fil-A is a great customer service model. But I can relate and feel like how difficult that may be. And I think that's where the work that we do comes in, because I've dealt with adults and I've been able to hold my composure, and I've been able to apply everything that I've learned, right, from a customer service standpoint. But just a from a business standpoint, when it comes to like securing clients, but the times that I've worked with young people and I've enjoyed it, but even being a person that could connect with them, that was the most difficult thing for me to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And although I never lashed out, because I had a firsthand understanding of like what it felt like to be lashed out on, right, by an adult, I internalized it. I didn't deal with it. It was just build up tension and frustration. But I always had a break, because I wasn't showing up day in, day out, right, managing 25 to 30 kids at a time. Right?
Yeah.
My job was to support teachers. My job was to support youth workers, right, who were going into schools to provide social emotional support. And so I want to ask this next question, because this work, I know it's personal to you.
Yeah.
You wrote an article, right? I believe you compared yourself to a rose that appeared in the garden, right?
Rose that grew from concrete.
Yeah, from the concrete, right?
Yeah.
Tell us more about that article, and I want you to tell the audience about why this work is personal to you. Tell them how, like you've hinted at, I can connect with students, right? I've been there, done that. Tell them what you mean by that.
Yeah. So The Rose That Grew From Concrete is a poem by Tupac Shakur. It's my favorite rapper.
Shout out Tupac.
Shout out to Tupac.
I know a couple songs.
A couple. I know quite a few. In an interview, Tupac is captured asking the person interviewing him the question that if you see a rose that grew from a crack in the concrete, would you stop to point out all the blemishes, or would you say, wow, look at that rose. Look what it came through the concrete. How is that even possible? Would you be amazed and astonished? And I think that if we as educators really knew everything that our students went through to even get to the classroom, it's not about feeling sorry for them. It's about being able to see the beauty in the rough rose. It's about being able to really see them and see yourself in them as well. And like you said, not lash out when we really may want to show them, you don't even know where I'm from. You don't know what I've been through. But you're accepting that in that moment, if they're giving me a hard time, they're having a hard time with something. It may not even be me, but I'm not going to take this personal. I've taught what people would consider the worst of the worst, quote unquote, because I don't call them that. I call them the best of the best.
Yeah.
Truly. The saying, the acronym YNs that's going around now, the ski mask and the real big guns, they're really, really respectful in the classroom where they're respected. That doesn't mean that they won't have their days and they won't have their moments, but I have truly been able to see, there's a quote that I applied when I first started teaching that says, kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And my students are still my why. I was a student when I was in the 9th grade that slipped between the cracks. And I had alcohol poisoning at the beginning of my 9th grade year. And according to the doctors and my parents and they were told like she almost died. And I had to leave Dalloway. I was at Dalloway kindergarten through ninth grade. And I went to North Little Rock at that time. I went to 5 high schools in 4 years during my 9th through 12th grade journey. And once I slipped between the cracks, I had a 7th grade English teacher that reached out to me. And she said, "What's going on? I'm hearing stuff. I can't believe this is true." And I'm like, "I don't want to be here. I hate it here. I want to live back in Pine Bluff. I want to be with my dad." And I was focused on everything that was beyond my control. And she asked me the question, "Well, what do you want to do with your life?" And up until that point, I thought I was going to be a lawyer, or I said, "I'm just still figuring it out." And she's like, "No, but what do you want to do? What do you want to be?" I said, "Well, I'm going to be a teacher." She said, "What? Why?" And I could hear her voice like, "That's a big jump," on the phone. And I said, "Well, because I realized how important good teachers are. You just helped me realize that. And so maybe I'll be able to help somebody else from falling between the cracks." And I was in the 9th grade when I made that decision. And Tupac has a part of his poem that says, "Funny it seems, but by keeping its dreams, it learned to breathe fresh air." That dream carried me through my 9th grade year to my senior year. I was able to graduate. My senior year, I made a 4.0 the whole time. My 9th grade year, I was like at a 1 point something GPA. And before that, I was like an all A honor roll student. And so that's why my teacher was like, "Who are you? What is going on up there?" And I'm able to articulate to teachers and even to my students when I taught that, like when teachers say like they don't care, like, you're right. There's a part of them that truly may not care. Have you stopped to ask why? Like, no, because you're so busy like trying to get your job done too, that child is just like another problem on your plate. And so some people aren't even stopping to kind of really build those authentic relationships. It hurts to care. It's not easy to actually like care. It's not easy. It's not easy when your heart is really in it. Only those people close to you can hurt you. And so sometimes you may have like tried to care, and then you had to deal with a student that you like, after all I've done, or even like just as people, you feel like you invest so much energy, so much time, and then you don't see the outcome that you were expecting. You don't get what you were looking for in the end. And so over time, that burnout begins to like really set in. And so once I graduated, I kept that dream, and it carried me through UAPB. Because of my F's on my transcript, I wasn't eligible to graduate high school with honors. So I decided I'm going to graduate UAPB with honors. I graduated summa cum laude. Went on with my master's program 4.0, specialist program 4. I've always been a high performer, high achiever, but because I'm able to understand what happens when somebody falls between the cracks, what that feels like, being in between the cracks and even making it out and being able to reach people, because you can't say it's not a calling and acknowledge like the irony of like, I accepted this in 9th grade. When I accepted my contract, I thought I was signing up to be a 7th grade English teacher. I learned in August of the beginning of that school year, like we're 2 weeks out from school getting started, that the teacher that was going to teach 9th grade was like, nah, because apparently these kids had a really interesting reputation from their 7th and their 8th grade year. So that teacher had already been in the system. So she was able to say, put me in a different grade level. And because I'm a newbie, I was fresh. You got to get what you get and you don't throw a fit. And so I find out I'm teaching 9th grade. I'm like, Wow. So at first I thought 7th grade, that was when you catch them or lose them. And I learned, no, it's never too late. Even now, I still believe no matter how old somebody gets or how young they may be, we're all able to grow and change and evolve. But that takes time. It takes time, it takes effort. But I was a student that fell between the cracks. When people say they don't care, I'm like, they can't care. They probably don't have that capacity in that moment. I was grieving. I just lost my sister in a car accident at the beginning of my 9th grade year. Yeah. And I had lost home. Pine Bluff was home to me. 9th grade, Dollaway, all of that was all that I knew. Being somewhere new that I didn't choose to be, I didn't want to be, it was consuming me. And there were many days where I was wrestling with God, saying, well, why did you even let me live? So caring about my schoolwork was truly one of the least of my concerns. And I experienced the same thing as an educator, teaching in Pine Bluff, and even being a building leader, that some people don't care. And we may have to care more than them about themselves, not to the point where you think it's your job to save them, but are you actually serving the people that God has trusted you with in that moment, in that season, for that year, for that 45-minute class period, or that day, or because they're only be in that grade that year. That's all you have with them when you're serving from just like the classroom level.
Yeah, no, that's profound. And so everything you were carrying, one thing that stood out to me, you talked about making a decision to go live with your dad. Mm-hmm. You were carrying that as a child. You were carrying that as a student. Mm-hmm. And I'm guessing, based on how most schools are set up, no one in your school really knew about this transition.
No. I moved out of my mom's house in the 6th grade, and I moved in with my dad in the 6th grade. After the alcohol poisoning is when I had to move back in with my mom, who was living in North Little Rock at the time. Yeah. So no one knew when I left my mom's house, and no one knew when I moved back with my mom. I was just a kid being implanted in different places. Yeah. Living with my dad, we had went through some things like mothers and daughters. They have very interesting relationships, to say the least. And I just remember being like, Dad, I can't take it no more. I gotta go. I gotta live with you. But I remember being at school and still being that 4.0 student, smiling, la la land, life is great, because school became a place of home. Boys and Girls Club was a place I called home. I felt anchored in these places. So no one knew. My 7th grade English teacher had us do a writing assignment where she played the song Wings of Forgiveness by India Arie. And that was my first time journaling about everything I had went through with my mom. And I just remember I wasn't the only one in the classroom boohoo crying, but it was so many of us in there with tissue and tears and weeping as we were writing and listening to that song. And that's just one way that teachers are able to really reach the student. And I tell my students, that's why I became an English teacher. Not just because I love reading, but because when I was in the 7th grade, my English teacher said, your words can heal your pain. Mm-hmm. And I believed her, and that stuck with me. And I've been writing ever since.
Absolutely. I love it. This has been such an insightful and enlightening conversation with Rebecca Newby. The Growing to a Great podcast, we're wrapping up season 1 and preparing to begin season 2. I wanted to end season 1 talking to an educator, because I wanted every educator who's listened to this podcast to understand that I didn't create the Green to Be Great framework in a vacuum. I created it, number one, from years of listening to educators, just like I've demonstrated on this podcast. And so I've created it with your teachers, and I've created it with building leaders in mind. But then also it's based on lived experience. And so I wanted to honor the people that I want to serve by bringing one of yours on the podcast to have the conversation. We've talked to a mental health therapist this episode. We've talked to a psychiatrist, a child psychiatrist this episode. And now we've talked to an educator who has the lived experience of a student living with chronic adversity, the lived experience of being a teacher in the classroom, and the lived experience of being a building leader. And so you'll hear more from Miss Newby on episode 7. She'll also be the featured teacher for season 2 of the podcast, which doesn't have a release date yet, but we'll share this conversation over 2 or 3 episodes to start the new season. And always in the episode by telling educators, thank you. I see you. I appreciate you. And I look forward to some of the amazing conversations that I'll have over the next 6 to 7 months inside of school buildings with educators and building leaders like Rebecca Newby herself. Until next time, keep being great, keep striving, and keep showing up for the next generation. I'm Raymond Omar Long, the podcast host of The Green Light to Be Great and the managing partner and social impact strategist of a Long Impact Group.